The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Windsor Castle as Camilla stood before her ornate dressing table, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for a small velvet box hidden beneath layers of silk scarves. Inside lay a ring that had been the source of countless sleepless nights and whispered conversations behind closed doors. The emerald and diamond piece sparkled with an intensity that seemed to mock her current predicament. Charles had given her this ring during one of their most intimate moments together, long before their relationship had become public knowledge. It represented everything they had built together through years of secrecy, scandal, and eventual acceptance by the royal family and the British public. The weight of its significance felt heavier with each passing day, especially now that tensions within the family had reached a breaking point. The ring had originally belonged to Queen Elizabeth's private collection, a fact that Charles had revealed to Camilla during a romantic evening at Highgrove House. He had explained how his grandmother had worn it during some of her most cherished private moments, and how he wanted Camilla to carry on that legacy of quiet strength and dignity. The gesture had moved Camilla to tears, understanding the profound trust Charles was placing in her by sharing such a precious family heirloom. However, what Charles didn't know was that Camilla had discovered something troubling about the ring's history. During a routine insurance appraisal, the jeweler had mentioned that the piece had previously been examined by another member of the royal family just months before Charles had given it to Camilla. The timing coincided perfectly with a period when Kate Middleton had been spending considerable time at Windsor Castle, helping with various charitable events and family functions. The revelation had shaken Camilla to her core. She began to question whether Kate had somehow influenced Charles's decision to give her the ring, or worse, whether there was some deeper significance to the piece that she wasn't aware of. The uncertainty gnawed at her, creating a growing rift between her public composure and private anxieties. As weeks passed, Camilla found herself studying Kate's behavior more closely during family gatherings. She noticed how the younger woman's eyes would occasionally linger on Camilla's jewelry, particularly during formal events where the ring was prominently displayed. There was something in Kate's expression that Camilla couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of recognition, sadness, and what appeared to be suppressed knowledge. The situation became even more complicated when Camilla overheard a conversation between Kate and Prince William during a Christmas celebration at Sandringham. They were discussing family traditions and the importance of preserving royal heritage for future generations. Kate had mentioned how certain pieces of jewelry carried stories that deserved to be told, and how transparency within the family was essential for maintaining trust and unity. William had agreed, adding that secrets had a way of surfacing at the most inconvenient times, and that honesty, while sometimes painful, was always the better path forward. The conversation seemed innocent enough on the surface, but Camilla detected an undercurrent of meaning that made her increasingly uncomfortable. That evening, Camilla approached Charles about the ring's history, carefully probing for information without revealing her own discoveries. Charles had been characteristically vague, mentioning only that the piece had been in storage for years and that his mother had suggested it might suit Camilla's style. His casual dismissal of her questions only heightened her suspicions that there was more to the story than she was being told. The next few months brought a series of subtle but unmistakable tensions during family functions. Camilla noticed that Kate seemed to go out of her way to engage her in conversations about royal traditions and family history. These discussions often touched on themes of loyalty, honesty, and the responsibility that came with wearing symbols of the monarchy's heritage. During one particularly memorable encounter at a state dinner, Kate had complimented Camilla on her jewelry choices, specifically mentioning how certain pieces seemed to have found their perfect home with her. The comment was delivered with a warm smile, but Camilla detected something deeper in Kate's tone, a suggestion that perhaps not all of her jewelry had found its rightful place. The pressure of maintaining her composure while harboring these growing suspicions began to take its toll on Camilla's relationships within the family. She found herself becoming more withdrawn during gatherings, second-guessing every interaction and analyzing every comment for hidden meanings. Charles noticed the change in her behavior, but attributed it to the general stresses of royal life and public scrutiny. Camilla's closest friends and confidants began to express concern about her increasingly anxious demeanor. Lady Sarah, her longtime friend and advisor, suggested that perhaps it was time to address whatever was troubling her directly rather than allowing speculation and uncertainty to poison her peace of mind. The advice was sound, but Camilla struggled with how to approach such a delicate situation without potentially damaging relationships that had taken years to build. The breaking point came during a private family dinner at Clarence's house. Kate had been helping to clear the table after the meal when she paused to admire a family portrait that included Queen Elizabeth wearing the very ring that now adorned Camilla's finger. Kate's comment about the photograph sparked a conversation about the Queen's personal jewelry collection and how various pieces had been distributed among family members after her passing. Charles had mentioned how meaningful it was that certain items had found new homes with people who would appreciate their significance. Kate had nodded thoughtfully, adding that she hoped whoever received such precious gifts understood their full history and the responsibilities that came with them. The exchange seemed perfectly natural to Charles, but Camilla felt as though Kate was speaking directly to her, delivering a message that only she would understand. That night, Camilla lay awake replaying every conversation, every glance, and every subtle interaction she had observed over the past several months. The pattern that emerged painted a picture of Kate possessing knowledge about the ring that she hadn't shared, knowledge that seemed to be weighing on her conscience. The realization that Kate might be struggling with her own moral dilemma about whether to reveal what she knew added another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. The next morning brought an unexpected opportunity for clarity when Kate called to request a private meeting with Camilla. The conversation would be casual, Kate explained, perhaps a walk through the gardens followed by afternoon tea. There was something in Kate's voice that suggested this wouldn't be an ordinary social visit, and Camilla agreed to the meeting with a mixture of anticipation and dread. As Camilla prepared for the encounter, she made a decision that would change everything. She would wear the ring and observe Kate's reaction carefully. If there truly was something Kate needed to say about the piece, Camilla would create an opportunity for that conversation to happen naturally. The truth, whatever it might be, had to be better than the uncertainty that was consuming her thoughts and affecting her relationships. The decision to face the situation head-on represented a turning point in Camilla's approach to the mystery surrounding the ring. Rather than continuing to harbor suspicions and analyze every interaction, she would take control of the narrative and seek the truth directly. This choice would prove to be both brave and consequential, setting in motion a series of events that would test the bonds of family loyalty and force everyone involved to confront uncomfortable realities about trust, communication, and the weight of keeping secrets within the royal family. The gardens of Clarence's house were particularly beautiful that Tuesday afternoon, with late spring flowers blooming in carefully arranged displays that had been tended by the same gardening family for 3 generations. Kate arrived precisely at the agreed time, dressed in a simple navy dress that complemented her naturally elegant bearing. Camilla watched from the morning room window as Kate walked up the gravel path, noting how the younger woman seemed to pause momentarily before approaching the main entrance. When Kate was shown into the drawing room, Camilla immediately noticed how her eyes were drawn to the ring, just as she had suspected they would be. Kate's expression remained perfectly composed, but there was an unmistakable flicker of recognition that confirmed Camilla's growing suspicions about the true history of the piece she wore so proudly. Their initial conversation covered the usual topics of family updates, upcoming engagements, and charitable work. Kate inquired about Charles's health and expressed genuine concern about the pressures he was facing in his new role as king. Camilla appreciated Kate's thoughtfulness, but could sense an underlying tension that suggested this visit had a deeper purpose than casual family bonding. As they moved to the garden for their planned walk, Kate seemed to gather her courage before broaching a more serious topic. She mentioned how much she had learned about royal traditions since joining the family, and how important it was to understand the stories behind the various symbols and artifacts that represented centuries of British history. Her words were carefully chosen, but Camilla could hear the weight of unspoken knowledge in every sentence. The conversation took a more personal turn when Kate began discussing the challenges of maintaining family harmony while dealing with complex historical legacies. She spoke about how difficult it could be when information came to light that might affect relationships between family members, and how the desire to protect people sometimes conflicted with the need for transparency and honesty. Camilla found herself both impressed by Kate's maturity and increasingly anxious about what revelations might be coming. She decided to address the situation directly, commenting on how beautiful the afternoon light made her emerald ring sparkle. Kate's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. A brief intake of breath followed by a look of profound sadness that she quickly attempted to hide behind her usual gracious smile. That moment of vulnerability gave Camilla the opening she needed. She gently pressed Kate about whether there was something specific she wanted to discuss about the ring or its history. Kate's composure finally wavered as she admitted that she had been struggling with a difficult situation for months, torn between her loyalty to different members of the family and her belief that truth was ultimately more important than temporary peace. The story that Kate finally revealed was both heartbreaking and shocking. The emerald ring had not simply been selected from Queen Elizabeth's collection as a gift for Camilla. Instead, it had been specifically requested by Princess Diana years earlier as a potential engagement ring during a brief period when she and Charles were attempting to reconcile their marriage. Diana had admired the piece during a private viewing of the royal jewelry collection and had asked for it to be set aside as a symbol of their renewed commitment to each other. However, the reconciliation attempt had failed before the ring could be formally presented to Diana, and the piece had been quietly returned to storage. What made the situation particularly delicate was that Diana had shared her hopes about the ring with several close friends, including Kate's own mother, who had worked with Diana on various charitable projects during the 1990s. The information had been passed down through family connections, eventually reaching Kate through conversations with her mother about royal family history. Kate explained that she had initially dismissed the story as possibly inaccurate or exaggerated, but her own research into the royal jewelry collection had confirmed the essential details. She had discovered documentation showing that the ring had indeed been specially cleaned and appraised during the period when Diana had expressed interest in it, and that it had been photographed wearing the piece during a private sitting that was never made public. The revelation explained so many of Kate's subtle behaviors over the past months. Her careful comments about jewelry finding its rightful home, her discussions about family transparency, and her obvious discomfort when the ring was prominently displayed during public events. She had been carrying the burden of this knowledge while trying to decide whether revealing it would cause more harm than good. Kate's decision to finally share the information had been triggered by her growing concern about Camilla's visible anxiety and withdrawal from family activities. She had realized that her attempts to hint at the truth were only making the situation worse, and that direct honesty was the only way to resolve the growing tension between them. As Kate finished explaining the ring's true history, both women sat in stunned silence in the garden gazebo where they had sought privacy for their conversation. Camilla felt a mixture of emotions: anger at having been kept in the dark, sadness for Diana's unfulfilled hopes, and deep appreciation for Kate's courage in revealing such difficult information. The complexity of the situation was overwhelming, particularly considering how deeply Charles's feelings would be involved. Kate emphasized that she had no desire to create conflict within the family or to diminish the love and respect that Charles had shown in giving the ring to Camilla. Her only motivation was ensuring that everyone involved could move forward with complete understanding of the circumstances, rather than allowing misunderstandings and hidden knowledge to damage relationships that were important to all of them. The conversation, then, turned to the practical question of what should be done with this information. Kate made it clear that she had no intention of sharing the story with anyone else without Camilla's agreement, and that she would support whatever decision Camilla made about how to handle the situation. However, she also gently suggested that Charles deserved to know that the truth had come to light, if only to prevent future complications. Camilla appreciated Kate's sensitivity but felt overwhelmed by the implications of the revelation. She understood that Charles had likely given her the ring with the best of intentions, possibly without even remembering its connection to Diana's hopes for their marriage. However, she also realized that wearing the piece now felt fundamentally different knowing its full history and the pain it might represent. The two women spent the remainder of their time together discussing the various options available to them. Kate suggested that there might be a way to address the situation privately with Charles that would allow him to understand why the ring's history might make it an inappropriate gift, while also acknowledging his thoughtfulness in wanting to share something precious with Camilla. As their meeting concluded, both women agreed that some time for reflection would be valuable before any decisions were made about next steps. Kate promised to keep their conversation completely confidential, while Camilla considered how best to approach Charles about what she had learned. The bond between them had been strengthened by their honest exchange, but both understood that much more difficult conversations lay ahead. That evening, Camilla found herself staring at the ring with completely different feelings than she had experienced just hours earlier. What had once been a symbol of Charles's love and trust now felt heavy with the weight of unresolved grief and missed opportunities. The beauty of the emerald seemed dimmed by the shadow of its complicated past, and she struggled to imagine wearing it again with the same pride and joy she had felt before. The situation had evolved from a mystery that needed solving into a moral dilemma that required careful navigation. Camilla understood that her next conversation with Charles would be one of the most important and difficult of their relationship, requiring her to balance honesty with sensitivity while addressing issues that touched on some of his most painful memories. Kate's courage in revealing the truth had provided clarity, but it had also created new challenges that would test the strength of the family bonds that had taken years to build and solidify. 3 days passed before Camilla found the courage to approach Charles about her conversation with Kate. She had spent those days in careful contemplation, weighing every possible approach and considering the potential consequences of various ways to reveal what she had learned. The ring remained in its velvet box, unworn since her meeting with Kate, its absence from her daily attire serving as a constant reminder of the difficult conversation that lay ahead. Charles had noticed Camilla's subdued mood and the absence of the ring, but his gentle inquiries had been met with reassurances that she was simply dealing with some personal matters that required time to sort through. His respectful acceptance of her need for space only made the prospect of disappointing him more painful, as it reminded her of the patient, understanding nature that had drawn her to him in the first place. The opportunity for their crucial conversation arose on a quiet Friday evening at Highgrove House. Charles had suggested a simple dinner together, just the two of them, as a way to reconnect after what he sensed had been a stressful week for Camilla. The intimate setting was perfect for the discussion they needed to have, but it also made the prospect of delivering difficult news even more emotionally challenging. As they finished their meal, Camilla gently steered the conversation toward family relationships and the importance of honesty in maintaining trust between people who loved each other. Charles agreed wholeheartedly, sharing his own thoughts about how his experiences had taught him that temporary discomfort was always preferable to long-term deception or misunderstanding. Drawing strength from his words, Camilla carefully explained that she had discovered something about the emerald ring that he needed to know. She emphasized her appreciation for his gift and her understanding that he had given it with love and the best of intentions, but that circumstances had come to light that made the situation more complicated than either of them had realized. Charles listened with growing concern as Camilla recounted her conversation with Kate and the revelation about Diana's connection to the ring. His expression shifted from confusion to surprise to what appeared to be genuine shock as the full implications of the story became clear. When Camilla finished speaking, Charles sat in stunned silence for several long moments, his face reflecting the complex emotions that the news had triggered. His initial reaction was one of profound embarrassment and regret. Charles explained that he had completely forgotten about Diana's interest in the ring, and that the memory had only begun to return as Camilla spoke. He had been focused on finding something special for Camilla from his mother's collection, and the emerald piece had seemed perfect without any conscious recollection of its previous significance. The revelation clearly pained Charles deeply, not because his gesture to Camilla had been inappropriate, but because he realized how the situation might affect everyone involved. He expressed particular concern about how Diana's sons might feel if they learned about the ring's history, and whether his oversight might be seen as insensitive to their mother's memory. Charles also struggled with the realization that his attempt to honor Camilla with a meaningful gift had inadvertently created a situation that could cause distress to multiple family members. The irony was not lost on him that his desire to share something precious from the royal collection had resulted in such complicated emotional consequences. As they continued to discuss the situation, Charles revealed additional context that helped explain how the oversight had occurred. The period when Diana had expressed interest in the ring coincided with some of the most painful months of their marriage, and Charles admitted that he had deliberately tried to suppress many memories from that time as a way of moving forward with his life. The therapeutic work he had done to process his grief and guilt about his failed first marriage had included strategies for letting go of particular memories that were too painful to dwell upon. Unfortunately, this had resulted in the unintended consequence of forgetting important details that might have prevented the current situation. Charles expressed deep gratitude to Kate for having the courage to reveal information that must have been difficult to share. He understood that her decision to speak up had required her to risk causing pain to people she cared about, and he respected her judgment that honesty was ultimately the right choice despite its immediate emotional cost. However, Charles also struggled with feelings of anger and frustration that were not directed at any individual person, but at the situation itself. He felt betrayed by his own memory and upset that his attempt to create something beautiful and meaningful had been complicated by forces beyond his control. The emotional weight of dealing with ongoing reminders of his past mistakes was clearly taking a toll on his ability to remain composed. As the evening progressed, Charles's emotions became increasingly intense. He began to pace around the room, expressing frustration about the impossibility of escaping the shadow of his first marriage despite decades of effort to move beyond it. Every attempt to create new traditions and meaningful gestures seemed to be haunted by unresolved issues from his past. Camilla tried to provide comfort and perspective, reminding Charles that his intentions had been pure and that the situation was the result of forgotten memories rather than any deliberate insensitivity. She emphasized that the most important thing was addressing the situation thoughtfully now that all the facts were known, rather than dwelling on regrets about what had already happened. However, Charles's emotional state continued to deteriorate as he contemplated the broader implications of the situation. He worried about how to explain the circumstances to Diana's sons without reopening old wounds or creating new sources of family tension. He also struggled with the question of whether to seek out and return other items from the royal collection that might have similar complicated histories. The conversation was interrupted by a phone call from William, who was checking in about weekend plans for the family. Charles managed to maintain his composure during the brief conversation, but the sound of his elder son's voice seemed to intensify his emotional turmoil about how to handle the situation appropriately. After ending the call, Charles's frustration reached a boiling point. He began to voice his anger more forcefully, expressing resentment about the impossible position he felt placed in by circumstances beyond his control. His words became heated as he struggled to process the complex emotions triggered by the evening's revelations. The intensity of Charles's reaction surprised Camilla, who had expected disappointment and regret but had not anticipated such a strong emotional explosion. She realized that the situation had touched on deeper issues related to his ongoing grief about Diana, his relationship with his sons, and his struggle to establish his own identity separate from the painful memories of his past. As Charles's emotions reached their peak, Camilla understood that their quiet evening together had opened wounds that went far beyond the immediate issue of the ring. The situation had become a catalyst for addressing larger questions about family healing, the weight of royal traditions, and the challenge of creating positive new memories while honoring complicated histories. The conversation that had begun as a simple sharing of information had evolved into something much more profound and emotionally charged, setting the stage for confrontations and revelations that would affect the entire family. Charles's explosive reaction suggested that the ring situation was merely the visible surface of much deeper emotional currents that had been building pressure for years. The evening concluded with both Charles and Camilla understanding that their relationship, and indeed the stability of the broader family dynamic, would be tested by how they chose to handle the challenging days ahead. The ring had become more than a piece of jewelry. It had become a symbol of the delicate balance required to navigate love, loyalty, and truth within the complex structure of royal family relationships. The aftermath of Charles's emotional explosion that Friday evening created a tension within the household that affected everyone who came into contact with the royal couple over the following days. Staff members noticed the king's unusually sharp responses to routine questions and Camilla's careful, measured behavior that suggested she was walking on emotional eggshells. The weekend that should have brought family together for planned activities instead became a period of careful avoidance and whispered conversations. Charles had spent most of Saturday morning in his private study, alternating between furious pacing and long periods of brooding silence. His private secretary had been forced to reschedule several appointments after witnessing the king's inability to focus on official matters. The normally composed monarch seemed consumed by an internal struggle that was affecting his capacity to fulfill even basic royal duties. Camilla, meanwhile, had retreated to her own quarters, spending hours on the phone with her closest confidants seeking advice on how to help Charles process his emotions while managing the broader implications of their situation. Her conversations with friends revealed her deep concern not just about the immediate crisis, but about the long-term effects that such emotional turmoil might have on Charles's health and their relationship. The situation became more complicated on Sunday when William and Kate arrived at Highgrove for their planned family visit, bringing their children for what was supposed to be a relaxed afternoon with their grandfather and step-grandmother. The contrast between the children's excited energy and the subdued atmosphere they encountered was immediately apparent to both parents. Kate, who was already aware of the difficult conversation that had taken place between Camilla and Charles, quickly realized that the situation had escalated beyond what anyone had anticipated. Her own guilt about having triggered such intense emotions was evident in her careful attempts to gauge the mood and determine how she might help resolve the growing crisis. William, however, was completely unprepared for the tension he encountered. His father's usually warm greeting was replaced by a stiff formality that immediately put the entire family on edge. When William attempted to inquire about what might be troubling Charles, he was met with dismissive responses that only heightened his concern and curiosity. The breaking point came during tea when one of the children innocently asked Camilla why she wasn't wearing her pretty green ring that they had admired during previous visits. The simple question seemed to trigger something in Charles that had been building all weekend. His reaction was swift and completely disproportionate to the innocent inquiry. Charles's voice rose as he addressed the room with barely controlled fury, demanding to know why everyone seemed so interested in discussing jewelry and past relationships. His words were harsh and directed at no one in particular, but the intensity of his emotion was frightening to witness, especially for the young children who had never seen their grandfather in such a state. Kate's immediate response was to shield the children from the emotional storm that was erupting around them, quickly guiding them to another room with promises of games and activities. Her protective instincts kicked in as she recognized that the adults needed to resolve their conflict without traumatizing the younger family members who had become unwitting witnesses to the crisis. William's reaction was entirely different. As he watched his father's emotional breakdown, years of suppressed frustration and concern came to the surface. He had spent decades watching Charles struggle with the ghosts of his past, and he felt that enough was enough. The sight of his children being exposed to such intense adult emotions triggered his own protective anger. When Charles continued his tirade, making references to being haunted by mistakes from decades past, and expressing resentment about never being allowed to move forward, William finally exploded with his own pin-up emotions. He confronted his father with accusations that Charles was allowing his guilt about Diana to poison every relationship and family gathering. The confrontation between father and son was intense and painful to witness. William accused Charles of using his emotional pain as an excuse to avoid dealing with present realities, while Charles defended himself by pointing out the impossible pressures of living under constant public scrutiny while trying to heal from profound personal losses. As their argument escalated, both men said things that they would later regret. William questioned whether Charles was capable of moving beyond his past enough to be an effective father and grandfather, while Charles accused William of lacking understanding about the unique burdens of royal responsibility and the weight of carrying historical legacy. The confrontation was witnessed by Camilla, who found herself in the impossible position of wanting to defend Charles while also recognizing the validity of many of William's concerns. Her attempts to mediate between father and son were largely ignored as both men seemed determined to air grievances that had been building for years. Kate, meanwhile, was dealing with her own emotional crisis as she realized that her decision to reveal the truth about the ring had triggered a family breakdown that was affecting innocent children and threatening relationships that had taken years to rebuild. Her guilt about her role in creating the current situation was overwhelming, even though she understood that her honesty had been the right choice. The situation reached its lowest point when Charles, in his anger and frustration, made direct accusations about Kate's motivations for revealing the ring's history. He suggested that she might have been deliberately trying to undermine his relationship with Camilla or create drama within the family for reasons he couldn't understand but deeply resented. Kate's response to these accusations was immediate and devastating in its quiet dignity. She explained calmly that her only motivation had been protecting the family from the kind of explosive confrontation they were currently experiencing, and that she had hoped honest communication would prevent exactly the type of crisis they were now facing. Her words seemed to penetrate Charles's anger and force him to confront the irrationality of his accusations. The realization that he was attacking someone who had acted with courage and good intentions appeared to shock him into recognizing how far his emotional spiral had progressed. William's anger at seeing his wife attacked for doing what she believed was right added another layer of intensity to the family conflict. His defense of Kate was fierce and uncompromising, making it clear that any criticism of her actions was completely unacceptable to him and would have lasting consequences for family relationships. The afternoon that was supposed to strengthen family bonds had instead revealed deep fractures and unresolved issues that went far beyond the immediate question of an emerald ring. Each family member was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about their relationships, their communication patterns, and their ability to handle emotional crises together. As the confrontation reached its peak, it became clear that the ring had become a symbol of much larger issues within the family. Charles's explosive reaction had revealed the depth of his ongoing struggle with grief and guilt, while William's response had exposed his frustration with his father's emotional patterns and their effect on the broader family. Kate found herself at the center of a crisis she had tried to prevent, while Camilla struggled with guilt about her role in triggering events that had spiraled so far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. The afternoon's events had fundamentally changed the dynamic between all four adults and raised serious questions about how they would move forward together. The children, though protected from the worst of the emotional explosion, had sensed enough tension to understand that something serious was happening between the adults they loved and trusted. Their questions about why everyone seemed upset added another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. As the day drew to a close, each family member faced the reality that their relationships with each other had been fundamentally altered by the events they had experienced. The path forward would require not just addressing the immediate crisis, but confronting deeper issues about communication, trust, and healing within the royal family structure. The week following the explosive confrontation at Highgrove House brought a period of careful distance and reflection for all family members involved. Charles had retreated to his private apartments at Clarence House, emerging only for essential royal duties while declining most social engagements and family activities. His staff reported that he seemed deeply embarrassed by his loss of control and was struggling to find a way to address the damage his emotional outburst had caused. Camilla found herself in the difficult position of wanting to support Charles while also acknowledging that his behavior had been inappropriate and harmful to relationships she valued deeply. Her conversations with trusted friends revealed her concern that the incident might have lasting effects on family unity, particularly regarding the children who had witnessed the beginnings of their grandfather's emotional breakdown. William and Kate had returned to their own residence with heavy hearts, spending long hours discussing how to move forward after such a painful confrontation. William was particularly troubled by his own harsh words to his father, recognizing that his anger, while understandable, had contributed to the escalation of an already volatile situation. Kate continued to struggle with guilt about her role in triggering the crisis, despite reassurances from William that her honesty had been the right choice. The children, sensing the tension between their parents and their confusion about the events at Highgrove, required careful explanations about adult emotions and family relationships. William and Kate worked together to provide age-appropriate context while protecting their innocence and maintaining their positive relationships with both their grandfather and step-grandmother. On Wednesday of that week, Charles took the first step toward reconciliation by reaching out to Kate directly. His phone call was brief but heartfelt, focusing entirely on apologizing for his accusations and harsh words during their confrontation. He acknowledged that his emotional state had led him to say things that were both unfair and untrue, and he expressed deep regret for having made her a target of his frustration. Kate's response to Charles's apology was gracious and mature, emphasizing her understanding that the situation had been emotionally overwhelming for everyone involved. She also took the opportunity to reiterate that her decision to reveal the ring's history had been motivated entirely by love for the family and desire to prevent exactly the kind of crisis they had experienced. Charles's conversation with Kate opened the door for a similar outreach to William, though this call was more complex and emotionally charged given their father-son relationship and the deeper issues that had been raised during their confrontation. Charles acknowledged that William's criticisms about his handling of past grief had contained elements of truth that were difficult but necessary to hear. William's response to his father's apology was cautious but open to reconciliation. He emphasized that his primary concern was protecting his family, including both his wife and children, from being negatively affected by unresolved emotional issues. His willingness to work toward healing was conditional on Charles demonstrating genuine commitment to addressing the underlying problems that had led to his explosive behavior. The most difficult conversation came when Charles finally spoke directly with Camilla about the broader implications of the ring situation and his reaction to it. This discussion, which took place over dinner at Clarence's house on Thursday evening, required both of them to confront uncomfortable truths about their relationship and the ongoing influence of Charles's past. Camilla's approach to the conversation was both loving and firm. She expressed her understanding of Charles's emotional struggles while making it clear that his behavior toward Kate and William had been unacceptable and could not be repeated. Her message was delivered with compassion but left no doubt about her expectations for how future disagreements would be handled. Charles's response revealed the depth of his self-reflection over the previous days. He admitted that the ring situation had forced him to confront the reality that he had not processed his grief about Diana as completely as he had believed. The realization that his past continued to influence his present in such destructive ways had been both humbling and frightening. Together, they developed a plan for addressing both the immediate situation and the longer-term issues it had revealed. The emerald ring would be quietly returned to the royal collection, with Charles personally ensuring that any documentation of its history was properly preserved for future reference. More importantly, Charles committed to seeking professional support to help him develop better strategies for managing emotional triggers related to his past. The conversation also addressed the need for a formal family meeting to discuss communication patterns and establish better protocols for handling sensitive information in the future. Both Charles and Camilla recognized that the crisis had revealed weaknesses in how the family dealt with difficult topics, and they agreed that professional guidance might be valuable for everyone involved. Friday brought an unexpected opportunity for healing when the children, unaware of the complexity of the adult conflicts around them, called to invite their grandfather and Camilla for a weekend visit. Their innocent enthusiasm and obvious love for both adults served as a powerful reminder of what was truly important in the family relationships. The weekend visit, carefully planned to avoid any repetition of the previous week's tensions, became a turning point in the family's healing process. Charles's interaction with his grandchildren was noticeably more present and emotionally available than it had been in months, suggesting that confronting his emotional issues had created space for more authentic connections. Kate and Camilla found opportunities for private conversations that strengthened their relationship and established a foundation for future trust. Kate's courage in revealing difficult information was acknowledged and appreciated, while Camilla's grace in handling an impossible situation earned Kate's deep respect and admiration. William and Charles engaged in several meaningful conversations throughout the weekend, addressing not just the immediate crisis but deeper questions about their relationship and communication patterns. William's willingness to express his concerns directly, combined with Charles's openness to receiving difficult feedback, created possibilities for a more honest and healthy father-son dynamic. The weekend also provided an opportunity to address practical questions about royal traditions and family heritage in ways that honored both past and present relationships. The conversation about jewelry and its significance became a broader discussion about how to preserve family history while allowing for individual growth and new relationships. By Sunday evening, when William and Kate prepared to return home with their children, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically from the tension and anger of the previous week. While no one pretended that all issues had been resolved, there was a genuine sense of hope and commitment to working together more effectively in the future. The emerald ring, which had been the catalyst for so much emotion and conflict, was formally returned to the royal collection on Monday morning. However, its significance had been transformed from a source of secrecy and tension into a symbol of the importance of honest communication and the strength that could come from confronting difficult truths together. Charles's commitment to ongoing therapy and emotional growth became a model for the entire family's approach to handling personal challenges. Rather than seeing the need for professional support as a weakness, the family began to view it as a responsible way to ensure that individual struggles did not negatively affect their relationships with each other. The crisis had tested every relationship within the immediate family, but its resolution had ultimately strengthened their bonds and created new foundations for trust and communication. The lessons learned from the ring situation would continue to influence how they handled future challenges, with honesty and mutual support becoming central principles in their interactions. Kate's role in bringing the truth to light was ultimately recognized as an act of courage that had prevented longer-term damage to family relationships. Her willingness to risk temporary discomfort in service of lasting honesty became a model for how family members could support each other through difficult revelations and challenging conversations. The story of the Emerald Ring became a defining moment in the family's evolution, marking a transition from old patterns of secrecy and avoidance toward new commitments to transparency and emotional authenticity. The pain of the crisis had created opportunities for healing that might not have been possible without the catalyst of confronting such difficult truths together.